And so what we are going to do is, beginning next year at Spring Conference, we will present Attorney of the Year Award. Now, at the council, we had talked about maybe doing misdemeanor, felony, juvenile. But the discussion is, we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves because we want to recognize, attorneys that are truly making a difference in our world. So it may just be simply Attorney of the Year. We may do more than one. We haven't quite ironed all that out, but what we will do is we'll have, criteria, nomination process. And I'll just tell you right now, number of cases you win and or file is not even going to be considered, because that's not what we want this award to be about. We want it to be about dedication to our community and to the things that we are doing well as attorneys. And so more will come out in terms of, what that process looks like, how we'll go about, making the award and things like that. What I do, also, we are going to come up with a service award. And the service award is basically service to any or all of these things. For those of you that are new to UPC in the prosecution world, let me tell you, because I didn't have room on the slides. So UPC, Utah Prosecution Council, SWAP is the Statewide Association of Public Attorneys. SWAP-LAC is the Legislative Action Committee of that arm. CIVLAC is the Civil Legislative Action Committee. UMPA is the Utah Municipal Prosecutors Association. UPAA is the Utah Prosecutorial Assistants Association. UAC, the Utah Association of Counties. UCDAA is the Utah County and District Attorneys Association. ULCT is the Utah League of Cities and Towns. UMAA is the Utah Municipal Attorneys Association. So it's service to any of those groups. Service to us as prosecutors, our fellow community. Service to government attorneys, civil attorneys, many of you are filling that category. Service to the legislature. Service to law enforcement, whether that's teaching at post or other services that are provided. Service to your support staff, and service to your community. And so as we were talking about this award, it was more than just service to UPC. Because, serving UPC, we love it. You can serve on our council, you can serve on our training committee, you can serve on, various organizations, you can train for us, but that's not strictly what this award is all about. And so I am pleased, actually, let me pause it for just a minute, to announce the Utah Prosecution Council is pleased to announce and present the Steve Garside Service Award to its nominee, Steve Garside. And I'll bring him up here in just a minute. But many of you have seen me take pictures at our conferences. Sorry, I got on mute. But I put this together for Steve. Okay, sorry, it's not playing very much, very loud.
Each time you leave me
So, in honor of Steve's service to the Utah Prosecution Council, to prosecutors, to law enforcement, to attorneys in the state, to every other laundry list item, basically that list I just showed you, Mr. Garside has provided service to each one of those. So we are proud to announce, as I said, and name the Steve Garside Service Award. And so I've asked Gary Crane, before you give, we'll bring Steve actually up here, I want to have Gary come up and he's going to tell you a little more detail about some of the things that Steve has done over the course of his career. Put that in your pocket.
Thank you. Test? You hear it? Okay, very good. Very good. Bob gave me about 5 pages of information that is all relevant to Steve's accomplishment over a lifetime of service as an attorney and as a prosecutor. And I thought, how would I start this? How should I even begin? Because most of those years have been spent with me. He and I have been together for in the Layton City Attorney's Office for over 30 years. And so he's a partner, he's a brother, he's a fantastic trainer. I essentially attribute almost everything I know to Steve Garside, which some may question as to exactly how much that really is, but nonetheless, it's Steve Garside that I attribute a lot of what I know to, especially when it comes to the areas of criminal enforcement. There are 2 things, and I know this isn't a roast, but I've got to be able to tell you a couple of stories about Steve. There are 2 things that I tried to break him of early in our relationship together. And one was the mullet hairdo. And the second one was disappearing every time there was a snowstorm. There was no question that when it was snowing out, I knew that Steve would not be there till noon, because Powder Mountains, just up the road, Snow Basins, just up the road, and Steve would be skiing, early snow, first thing in the morning. And so you'll notice that Steve no longer has a mullet. That's as far as I got. Wasn't able to get to the rest of it. But it is a privilege for me to be able to give you just a little background on Steve and to tell you how much I appreciate him personally. You know, I wondered, I noticed all the pictures up here, and I wondered where he went all the time. But he was involved in so many groups and doing so many things for the betterment of the state, for the betterment of the legal profession. And he tried to tackle the legislature, but that was an impossible task. There's absolutely no way I hope we don't have any legislators here, but no way we can get that to improve over the years, because it just seems to get a little more dire each year. But I want to let you know how much I appreciate him. And I'm going to start maybe from the back a little bit, because I think a lot of you know that he is a significant contributor to the Prosecution Council, to training in the Prosecution Council. And everything I talk to you about, you could add the words "for many years" to it, because Steve has been involved in these things for many years. But I'm going to start at the bottom end of things. I'm not going to call it the bottom end of the things, but the things that I think are personal achievements that Steve has accomplished over the years. I want you to know that for many years, he and his wife have essentially voluntarily, after hours, done Dave Ramsey courses for our city employees, for the larger individuals in his neighborhood. But for years, he and his wife had, this is just a little thing, but it tells you a lot about Steve's personality and his character. And I have personally talked to individuals whose lives have been changed by the time, or because of the time that Steve and his wife have spent putting on those courses and contributing that time back to the community. This is the type of person that Steve is. Then we'll go to the youth within our community. Steve was an early proponent of youth court. And some of you may know, youth courts were not always valuable or considered valuable in the state, and there were very few of them when Steve started. But Steve started, I think, one of the first youth courts, successful youth courts in Layton City, and that's been going for many, many years. And many of those youth have come back as lawyers to our office, applying for jobs or in other parts of the state as lawyers. And Steve was instrumental in that process, and he has also sat on the youth court board for many years for the state, setting the rules, regulations, and requirements for youth court. But I can tell you that there are literally hundreds of youth that have benefited by what Steve put into play, and the time that Steve spends at the Capitol arguing for youth court and for the continuation of youth court. In addition to that, Steve was involved and has been since I started. I'd ask where he went during the afternoons, because the morning, of course, was skiing. But the afternoons, were spent with youth at the junior high, essentially a mock trial. And can you think of a better trainer for a mock trial presentation than Steve Garside? These kids didn't know what they had. But I think 3 times they went up to the state championship. And I understand 1 or 2 times, Steve can't remember, because that's one of the things that happens when you ski so many times and fall so many times. But anyway, I know that at least once they were state champions. And but every single year he would put out a number of attorneys, youth that would become attorneys in the future. And there are a lot of those youth that, because of what Steve taught them, followed the track of becoming attorneys, which I thought was, these are the personal things about Steve's life. I can go through the professional things, and I'll do that very quickly, but I want you to know how personal Steve has been in his contributions to the community and how he has benefited the larger community, not just the benefit that you and I receive from his training here. In addition to that, I want to talk to you a little bit about, he arm wrestles at the legislature every single year for anything to do with the criminal law, and he is not responsible for JRI. I want you to know that. He was responsible for being on the other side saying, this is not working and this is not going to work. I remember in many meetings, Steve stood up and was an advocate for the practical things that you learn on the front lines as prosecutors. Steve would stand up for those things, and legislators, and many of them who are not trained attorneys, have never been in a courtroom, have never tried a criminal case, have never done a ride-along with a police officer, would be making rules and regulations regarding what we do as prosecutors and what we do as municipal attorneys, county attorneys, without any experience in that area. And Steve would lend, they say that lobbyists are probably the strongest influence on the Hill. Steve was probably one of the strongest lobbyists for our cause in that respect. And over the years, he spent 30 years, at least 30 years in that position up on the Hill. The other thing he did was he essentially made sure my office was operating 100% of the time, while I spent the time on civil issues up on the Hill. So between the two of us, we were able to accomplish that, and I appreciate that sustaining that he managed to put on for me. He's been a master trainer. I think all of us at some time or another have had the benefit of receiving training at Steve's hands. And UPC is known for its excellent training. And I hope that never ends. I hope it just continues over the years. But Steve has been an instrument in making sure that that training has been excellent. He sat on the committees that essentially established the training for UPC and for other organizations as well. He has been participated in UMAA, on the Prosecution Council, which he sat on for over 30 years. I don't know, some of those pictures look like he was falling asleep in the chair, almost. But the number of meetings that he attended for Prosecution Council for all different types of things, I think probably the most prominent was to make sure that there was excellent training and excellent representation for those who were who are training. Steve also, I don't know, when I first got here, I had to figure out what NHTSA was because he would disappear for several days during the year to this place called the NHTSA conference or NHTSA training. Well, the National Transportation Safety Board was essentially, had Steve traveling across the country training on DUI prosecution, which I thought was a great tribute. It was a train the trainers is what it was. It wasn't training attorneys, it was training those who would go out across the country and train, and he did that for a number of years. He was a small claims court judge, and he was a rough judge to appear before because Steve wants to do what's fair, but he also follows the law very carefully. And for 20 years, I remember Steve going across the parking. I could account for him on those days. He would go across the parking lot into the courtroom, and he would spend time as a small claims court judge. And that just shows just one more way of contributing back to the community. They've given me almost 2 pages, and Bob assures me that these will be online so that you can take a look at some of the things in particular that Steve has accomplished. But also relative to small claims court, or not small claims court, but youth court, he was a recipient of the Scott Matheson Award for his work in mock trial and in small claim or youth court. And so, and that was a number of years ago. Just looking to see if there's anything that I've missed. I could probably talk. Steve had a way of essentially confronting somebody, but never offending somebody. And the worst offense that I can ever remember, I've got to tell you about, was this guy came into the front office and he was furious at the prosecutor, wanted to chat with the guy who was prosecuting him for this crime, and he was an older fellow. And I remember Steve and he got nose to nose, and I wondered, well, what's this guy going to say to Steve, or what's he going to do? Is he going to hit him? He's too old to hit him. Steve, he knows, would take him out. And so the guy just stood there and he says, you, and I thought he's going to call him something really, really good. You banana, is what he said. That's the worst offensive word I've ever used or heard used against Steve Garside in a conversation or an argument. So keep that in mind. But the unique piece of this was whenever there was a situation across the Wasatch Front, and we've had cities from the north to the south, ask Steve Garside if they could investigate serious public safety offenses. And I can tell you, Steve was a special investigator for a number of significant situations where you have a police chief or a fire chief involved in something they shouldn't have been involved in. And Steve did it in a very, very professional manner, carried those investigations out to the full extent. He was always well documented, but he was used by a number of communities. Once again, I tried to figure out where he went during those afternoons, but I knew that another thing he did was he worked with communities at being able to straighten out or help them with those situations within their communities. And I'm just going to say, from my standpoint, I could not have asked for a better law partner for the last 30 years. I almost feel like I'm delivering a eulogy, but it's not. Steve has just gone to work on the dark side. No, he's gone to work more on the civil side than he has on the criminal side, being named as the assistant city manager for Layton City and handling all personnel and risk and a lot of other responsibilities. I'm sure he will still be active in your community, in my community, in the things that he does, but I just want to tell you how much I appreciate him and how much I have appreciated the opportunity to work with Steve over these years, and more importantly, how I have appreciated the opportunity to learn from Steve Garside. And hopefully this award in the future will cause people to say, who was Steve Garside and what did he do? And I hope that they will have the opportunity of taking a look at the 4 pages that I have here, 4 or 5 pages that I have here of accomplishments. This is the type of attorney that we want to produce in the future. So thank you very much.
Steve. So for those of you that can't see the award, that's what it says. It's the Utah Prosecution Council presents the Steve Garside Service Award, and its first recipient is Mr. Steve Garside. Thank you.
There's a couple of things I did not accomplish. Actually, the list is very long. But one is obviously defeating JRI. Sorry, failed on that one. Another one that was kind of interesting is when they came up with what was the Public Defender Association that the state legislature created, and they put a board together, and UMA, the Utah Municipal Attorneys Association, was supposed to have 2 members on that board, and my name went up to the governor's office, and they changed the rules and said no prosecutors on the board. And so that's why we have the 2 civil representatives from the counties. But anyway, what an absolute opportunity and privilege it has been to be on prosecution council. From its start, when Jim Housley had it for a short period of time, then it was Mark Nash and Rose, and now we've got Bob and Marilyn and Tyson and Marlise and Ron. What a terrific team. And then the attorneys on the council. What great examples of what and who our profession is to be. I want to acknowledge my parents, who created a great foundation for me, for my incomparable wife, Chris, who is unconditional support in being able to pursue the things I love, and her parents, who've been so welcoming. And our children, who not only taught me lessons in life, but gave me the opportunity to appear in juvenile court and youth court, and not as a practitioner. You know, it's like being a member of the best team, right? I'm a member of the championship team with you, and they come up with an individual award, and they look around and say, we'll give it to the old guy. That was a name that I heard for the first time, I think, the last basic prosecutor course. We were doing the canine demonstration, and yours truly put on the bite suit. And one of the attendees turned to Sandy Johnson and says, "Why are we letting the old guy do this?" Anyway, I've never considered myself the old guy. But anyway, just for the record, though, the dogs only took me down 2 of the 3 times that they attacked, all right? Okay. But you folks, it is you that have taught and exemplified to me those valuable attributes of true ministers of justice. It's humbling enough to receive an award like this. But then the naming part of it is overwhelming, undeserved. I'm glad I'm not in a profession where I have to use words to articulate or describe how I feel and things like that, right? Anyway, it is my hope that what this recognition represents is not a list of accomplishments. It's not of places gone. It's not of presentations made, but it's a reflection of what's in here. What is our motivation as we wear multiple hats? Our motivation to keep our respective corners of the world better for all. That as we approach our duty in cooperation with our law enforcement partners, with whom we have a reciprocity of accountability, that as we approach these cases one by one, that we seek the remedy for the wronged victims, for those victims that have been wronged, and we give them the resources that empower them to obtain a full recovery. That for the individual defendant, we give them the opportunity for individual redirection and community restoration. And for our witnesses and for our jurors and the general citizenry, we give them the reinforcement and the reaffirmation of the positive reputation of our justice system. I love this work. I do love this work, and I love being associated with you, to being considered a colleague and counted among you. So in the words of Curtis Mayfield, we need to keep on keeping on. And finally and emphatically, as we keep on, it is my hope that every day we will be re-energized, and every day we will grab that passion as we remember who our client is, who it is that we truly serve. Justitia, Lady Justice. Thank you.